So as you guys probably know by now, I sell Country Ball plushies, but once the campaign is over, I can't bring them back. But I recently found the next best alternative. My Pollenball has returned, but not as a plush, but actually as a vinyl. It's like your very own little Country Ball action figure. Of course, just like always, I will only be able to sell this for a limited time. But finally, yes, I have brought back Pollenball. So check the link in the description down below to head over to makeship.com and get yours today. I'm actually really excited about this. I even got to help out in designing some of the artwork on the box as well. And I just really like seeing it in the packaging. You can see the background going on and everything. And of course, I would love to bring back more of my old Country Ball designs that I can't in plush form anymore, but this time with more vinyls. So we'll start with Poland and see what other ones we might be able to bring back. Countries that have US military bases. So obviously the US has military bases, and it's not that shocking to me that NATO has US military bases. I think it's actually reversed. I'm shocked that more countries probably don't have military bases that are at least in NATO. Like none for France, Czechia, or Hungary. Middle East has some military bases, and I wonder why that could be. There's some for Australia, but none for New Zealand. Probably just because most maps forget about them. Philippines, South Korea, Japan, and then it looks like only 4 African nations. There's only 2 in all of Latin America, and one happens to be Cuba. Oh, that's Guantanamo Bay, isn't it? Of all places in Latin America, I wouldn't have expected Cuba to have one. So the US has military bases in a total of 85 countries and territories. And I'm just curious if this number is going to increase or decrease in the future. This map does seem to be missing Djibouti though. Percentage of iPhone users as of September 2022. And automatically this has got to be some of the greatest data ever because Monaco is the top country and Poland is at the bottom. Is this some sort of glitch in the flag matrix? It's too perfect. So there seems to be a regional divide here where the eastern side of this map aren't really big iPhone fans. Some of the biggest Apple fanboys do come from Denmark, Norway, and Iceland though. Also there's a lot in the smaller but tend to be more rich city-states. Kinda surprised that Luxembourg isn't high on the list. What's going on with that? Albania is the only Balkan outlier, which I would love to know why. Albania has more iPhone users than Italy. Bulgaria, Hungary, Ukraine, and then the lowest Poland, all at around only 10 to 20%. Only 1 out of every 10 people have an iPhone in this country, which is pretty low comparing that to the almost 50% of US citizens that use iPhone. But to be honest, I'm actually surprised even the US isn't way higher than that. A lot of these dark green countries even have the United States beat in iPhone usage. Why did I think the number would be like 90% in the United States? I have an iPhone currently, but I used to have an Android. I think they both have their pros and cons. The world's 5 most populous circles of a 5-kilometer radius. Starting off the list, we obviously have India, not surprised, and Mumbai, India in 4, Cairo, Egypt in 3, another Indian city in 2, but they do not have that top spot. It is actually Bangladesh. This city has 5 million inhabitants within a 5-kilometer radius. That's actually so much higher when you really think about it than even the 5th place here. It might only be an extra 1.3 million people. Because they're all compacted in such a tiny place, that would make a huge difference. Here's a similar map showing the 10-kilometer radius. This time more of South Asia, Pakistan, and India. China now makes the list, but Bangladesh is still number 1. Cairo, Egypt finally gets that number 1 spot after being 2nd in the first 2 posts. This is a 15-kilometer radius, which if you know anything about Egypt's population density, this shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Everyone either lives by the river or this delta up here, that's it. Global access to electricity from 1990 to 2020. So 30 years ago, there was a huge chunk of the world, specifically around the, what's that called again? The equator. Like I'm talking from Mexico to North Africa to India, China. But as of the last 3 decades, this has really changed. It seems like most of Asia got into 100% like before even the year 2000. Same goes for all of Latin America almost. And now we have Africa slowly catching up. It's getting close, but obviously there's still more work to do. Look at Mongolia. Mongolia goes to 100% and then back down for some reason and then back up. What's up with that? Also interesting that it was Egypt and Tunisia to be the first African nations to be 100% electricity. There really needs to be a lot of work done still in the core of Africa. Papua New Guinea over here too, just slowly catching up even in 2020. All the languages spoken in China. For some reason, I feel like even this is not all the languages, probably even a couple missing here. So Mandarin does seem to be the most dominant, even cutting pretty deep into the country. Things get really complicated in the southern part of China. Also, I knew about the territory of Outer Mongolia, but didn't even think about that a lot of this region probably spoke Mongolian too. There's actually a lot of Korean speakers over here by North Korea. Did that cause some tension? Are they going to ask for this land back? Also, a whole lot of Tibetan and And then a lot along the South China border, a lot of smaller languages. There's so many down here that border Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam. Oh, there's Cantonese. I thought that would be much bigger. When you put it like this, how is China not like modern day Austria-Hungary? I guess Austria-Hungary not only had a bunch of different languages, but also ethnic groups. But this is probably one explanation why China has gone through so many civil wars in their past. Most studied language on Duolingo in each country. So the vast majority of the world seems to be studying English. That is the #1 language studied on Duolingo in these places. Except if you're in an already English-speaking country. So Australia and African nations that were a part of the former British Empire are choosing to learn French. Canada also formerly a part of that same empire, and of course they're choosing to learn French. Who knows why that is? For the English-speaking countries, it's either French or Spanish, which is what the US is learning. That's what I'm learning. And actually a lot of Northern Europe is choosing to learn Spanish too. The UK, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Greenland. That's a bit more surprising. They must really love vacationing in Spain. Well, the UK still has territory in Iberia, so that's not super surprising. Wonder why South Africa is choosing to learn Spanish though. Myanmar, the Philippines, Malaysia, they're all choosing to learn Japanese. So I'm choosing they're trying to maybe go there one day. Former Yugoslavian nations are learning German, and also this random country in Africa, which is actually not that random once you remember that this used to be a German colony back in 1914. Crazy that even 100 years later after the Germans were forced to leave, Namibia is still learning it. All the US states with a political trifecta in the government, basically their House, Senate, and governor are all a part of the same political party. And this map really just shows exactly how divided we really are. So of course the Pacific states have a Democratic trifecta, and then most of the Deep South has a Republican trifecta. Except for Louisiana, that's an outlier. As for all the gray states, these are all states that tend to be swing states in presidential elections. Well, kinda. There are some outliers like Massachusetts and I guess Kansas. They're not all swing states. Maybe this isn't super shocking. There does tend to be massive waves back and forth every election year, but it's crazy to see this map so lit up like this. None of the countries that bordered Poland before 1990 exist today. So 1989, this is obviously before the Soviet collapse and like just the fall of the Iron Curtain in general. I guess East Germany doesn't technically exist as a country, but it's still kind of Germany. Czechoslovakia used to be a thing, and then they decided, yeah, let's just become Czechia and Slovakia. And then once the Soviets fell, they were forced to release a whole lot of other states. I like this map. It is technically true. I see what they're doing. I think it's also interesting to consider the territorial evolution of Poland throughout time. Remember, as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, they went way out into the east. They had the Baltic states up here and even almost touched the Black Sea. Then this dark gray represents Poland before World War II, and then what they are now. So they've kind of slowly been migrating towards the west. It's like all Polish people are saying, what if we take the whole country and push it somewhere else? How common are different ores in each layer of a Minecraft world? So coal is more likely to be found below sea level, but you can also find a lot of it above sea level. Iron is definitely likely to be found below 50 levels, and copper is pretty much anything below 0. You'll find most redstone near bedrock, then gold, lapis, diamond, which is everywhere for the most part, but it's thin. Or not everywhere, but it's deep down. And then lastly, there's emerald, which is very rare, but you can find it above sea level. Obviously, it's not going to be very abundant though. Man, this is making me want to play Minecraft again. I need to start a world map server, I feel. Map of the different Greek island chains. And man, oh man, is there a lot of them. It's been several years I've been staring at maps, and yet I didn't even know the names of all these Greek island chains. I feel like I have heard of some of them, I just didn't know which ones they were. The most abundant seem to be these red ones. I'm afraid to pronounce all these because I know I'm going to butcher it. How did they define which islands go in which chain? Because all these seem pretty mixed in together. Some sort of geological similarity. I think of course it helps depending on the sea they're in. This is just really showing me how complicated geography must be in the Greek nation. Those poor kids got to learn all this? I think even I would fail those tests. North America's subdivisions in the year 1800. So the US got their independence in 1776, but by the year 1800 they looked a little bit like this. I don't know if all this territory was officially states at this point, but yeah. The Spanish still controlled Florida, and then all these really flat states was French Louisiana. Then there's New Spain, or basically the Spanish Empire. Also, Texas did not have its independence yet. Of course, Alaska was still part of the Russian Empire, and then Oregon country, which was Oregon, Washington, basically Cascadia, was pretty disputed. Which I guess a lot of this stuff was disputed. Unclaimed Arctic lands, Alberta Valley. Canada at this point was only the Quebec colony as well as the Ontario colony. Well, maybe some of these islands out this way as well. Canada was just different separations. They were still moving their way out towards the west like the US. North America has a pretty underrated time lapse. There was a lot of map changes countries. Just obviously it's not as interesting as like anything in the Eastern Hemisphere. And then it pretty much all took place within the span of just like 100 years. Defcon levels and their different meanings. Every time I read this, I'm always reminded of my past where I thought Defcon 5 was like the worst. Sounds like it'd be the worst. Boys were in Defcon 5. But in reality, this is actually the lowest state. At Defcon 4, we have above normal military readiness, as well as intel watch increased and security measures strengthened. Defcon 3 is when the Air Force only needs 15 minutes to mobilize. Defcon 2 is when armed forces can deploy in 6 hours or less. And then finally at Defcon 1, everyone is at max readiness. Nuclear war is imminent. That's not terrifying. Why do I feel like Defcon 5 still should be the top? And I still feel like I forget the numbers and their definitions all the time. The median household income of each U.S. state, and unfortunately the state of Mississippi is the lowest at about $41,000 a year. New Mexico, Arkansas, Alabama, West Virginia also on the bottom, versus the top 5. Connecticut, Massachusetts, Hawaii, Rhode Island, Maryland, and New Jersey is number 1. New Jersey's median household income is over $80,000. I get Hawaii, you have to be pretty rich to live on those islands. California, the state with the most population, is not even in the top 10. I think it's in like 11. But look at the dots though. They have some extremely rich people, whereas New Jersey is much more compacted, which I guess is why their median income is a little bit higher than everybody else's. Virginia also has like very poor and very rich. What is this one dot out of New Mexico? It's like way up there. Same for like Tennessee and Georgia. I'm just like looking at these outliers. Oh, these dots are all the counties. So some counties are just super rich, and it looks like Virginia has a whole lot of them. The most visited website in all countries of the world. In the US, it is Amazon.com, which is pretty rare, and Canada has a whole lot of lay epic Redditors. Twitter is number 1 in Mexico, and Guatemala are huge Nintendo fanboys. Look at all the truly intelligent gigachads out there where their top visited site is Wikipedia. A lot of intellectuals there, definitely. Wikipedia top in Europe too. This is like a fascinating map to me. Of course, BBC.com is popular in the UK. I'm like so surprised and also terrified that so many people visit Twitter the most. There are certain aspects of Twitter that's good. I like the news. You can really stay up to date with stuff. There's also a whole lot of bad. I guess all these sites have a whole lot of bad. The Philippines also really love Reddit. There's a ton of websites that obviously I don't really know about because everyone has, you know, their different thing. Angola's top site is SoundCloud. Oh, the SoundCloud rappers must love this. I always wanted to be a SoundCloud rapper. Nicaragua, no, not 9gag. How is the US one of the only countries that go to Amazon so much? Oh, there is Burundi. Very curious what LiveDoor and Titstori is. I know for sure some of these sites is basically like a country's equivalent to Amazon, so maybe that's why Amazon isn't popping up for other places. Still, I really like this. The super original and not at all boring names of Portuguese regions. We have the North region, the Center region, beyond the Tagus, oh, and the West. Those are some brilliant names. And that's not all, because there's also Azure Bird and Wood, would you believe that? As well as the Lisbon metro area. Portugal, I just have so many questions. I will admit I was expecting something totally different after I read North region and Center region, and then they just like threw a curveball in there. But then this is just the pinnacle of naming regions. This country's had quite the past when it comes to naming things, especially cities when translated. Like I said, please check out the link in the description down below to makeship.com to get your Pollenball vinyl today. And big thanks to Why Am I Doing This? $20 is a lot, Drew. aPhatNarwhal,
Barnsky W,
Drew's Argentinian grandpa, Chris3773,
DannyThyGamer,
GoodOldRyah, istoledrewspetdog,
Jakov, bruney,
LuxembourgLover,
Risk,
Bjorkman, Phresh Animations,
RyeThePie,
the
Polish-Lithuanian
Mexican
Commonwealth,
760,
Twickenhamster,
Veiotic, ZaneyBoi,